Well, and welcome to Moral Side of the News, our weekly discussion of today's top stories from a religious, moral, and ethic standpoint. I'm Shawn Kaelin with the WHS Crusade for Children. I'm joined today by a distinguished panel of local religious leaders. Father Toan, Epiphany Catholic Church. Dr. John Slider, retired pastor, Free Methodist Church. And Rabbi Stan Miles, Louisville Melton School. We begin this week with what Israel calls precise retaliatory strikes against Iran. Dozens of Israeli aircraft hitting multiple military targets across Iran in a wave of what many are calling very measured attacks.
Israel launching an unprecedented aerial bombardment overnight on Iran, with Iranian air defense flashing in the sky over Tehran. This morning, the first image of Israeli aircraft that conducted the hours-long nighttime mission. Israel hitting back at Iran for that massive ballistic missile attack earlier this month, with Israel's Air Force saying it unleashed several waves of strikes hitting military targets deep inside Iran.
We conducted targeted and precise strikes on military targets in Iran, thwarting immediate threats to the state of Israel.
Overnight, the IDF saying the targets included Iranian air defense systems and missile and drone storage and production sites. This morning, the Iranian regime downplaying the attack. Iranian officials echoing a claim on Iranian state TV that it caused limited damage. But Iran saying 2 of its soldiers were killed in the attacks on military bases in 3 regions. Israeli officials confirming Iran's highly valuable oil and nuclear infrastructure was not targeted, amid fear that could spark a wider war. The US deploying more F-16s into the Middle East just ahead of Israel's attack. Just last week, sending an advanced THAAD air defense system to Israel, placing 100 American troops to operate it here on Israeli soil. The IDF saying it is now at peak readiness for offensive and defensive action.
So we've been talking about this for several weeks now. We've been awaiting a response from Israel on Iran after they fired their 200 ballistic missiles at the beginning of October. Israel has said that Iran has said we are going to strike back. Israel said we're not going to wait for you to strike us back. We'll go on offense if necessary. So how do we see this playing out from here?
It seems to me like Israel is sadly the proxy for the free world against Iran and Iran's belligerent attitudes. You know, that massive missile attack to the state of Israel from Iran took place on one of our high holy days, and that's the modus operandi of the bad players in that part of the world. I'm just hoping that Iran's nuclear capability is nullified. That's the most important thing. That they don't stop. That they stop their bad behavior in the area and upsetting the nation. The area was moving so much closer to peace before October 7th, 2023. And my hope and prayer is that we can move in that direction. Imagine if from Canada we heard the message over and over and over again, as Canadians, we want to destroy the United States of America. We do not want you to live. This message has been part of the mantra of Iran since 1979, and constantly to Israel. And imagine if, and no, the state of Israel and the Islamic Republic of Iran are not contiguous countries, but enough already. People have the right to live in peace. People have the right to live without the constant threat of military action and death.
Earlier this month when I was on and we discussed this, Stan, and you weren't here because it was a high holy day, if that's the term, and I said that Israel had the responsibility as a government to protect its citizens. I was suggesting that they needed to strike at the nuclear capability. Obviously, the Israeli Defense Force had a better idea, and it looks like it was better. But what they did was strip away the defensive shield to allow for further attacks as needed or as desired, I guess you could say. I think Israel has, of course, has always identified Iran as the perpetrator of the October 7th and all the recent attacks upon it. It's finally stripped away and gone beyond the proxies and gone to the source, really. Again, I think the moral position, at least from my perspective, is that morally the government of Israel has a responsibility first of all, to protect its citizens, and I think it's doing that.
Yeah. I want to echo that as well, but my first hope is that somehow the threat to eradicate one another's existence need to be stopped. And I think it comes from both sides, but as little as I know, I think it's more from the Iranians' regime toward Israel than vice versa. And I think we need to stop that rhetoric, and somehow from one perspective, we need to stop the war, and then we need to also talk about one's right to live and one's right to existence. And just from my own cultural backgrounds, I was born in Vietnam, and my family immigrated here in the early 1990s. And when I grew up, and to this day, for thousands of years, we Vietnamese have always been fearful of the bigger country next door to us, which is China. And here, looking at Israel toward Iran, and for example, Ukraine to Russia, and many other smaller countries toward bigger country. And those bigger regimes and bigger countries, as long as they don't have any check and balances, they can threaten the neighbors. And for us Vietnamese or Vietnam or those who smaller countries always live in fear of losing our lives and losing our identity. And I think it's sad that the state of Israel or the people of Israel, not only because morally and religiously I'm a Christian and a Catholic, I do have a little bias toward the people of Israel for their own existence, but also because of what my faith tells me, and this is our moral side of the news, that they have the right to live, not to be eradicated. And I think it's getting worse and worse, and we need to somehow stop throwing bomb or threaten one another.
I think there does need to be some culpability assigned to what has allowed Iran to expand its nuclear capabilities and to become more aggressive. From my perspective, America, the United States, has some responsibility in what it is allowing Iran to do, both with releasing funds a few years back, but just a weak stance, I would suggest, toward the aggression of Iran.
There has to be, when you're dealing with a dictatorship, there has to be a line in the sand.
Yeah, and one that you'll enforce if it gets crossed, right?
Great conversation, good discussion as always. We turn now to the presidential race, just 2 days from Election Day. both candidates making last-minute campaign stops in the battleground states.
Former President Trump in Green Bay, Wisconsin last night wearing an orange vest used by sanitation workers.
Kamala Harris is not fit to be president of the United States. In no way is she fit. She doesn't have the intellect, the stamina, or that special quality that real leaders, people like Brett Favre, have.
At a rally with Packers legend Brett Favre, before last night's rally, Trump hoisting himself into a garbage truck, taking reporters' questions from the window.
For Joe Biden to make that statement, it's really a disgrace.
Trump slamming President Biden for appearing to call his supporters garbage.
The only garbage I see floating out there is his supporters. His demonization of seen as unconscionable, and it's un-American.
Are we ready to win?
The vice president also in Wisconsin last night, appearing with the band Mumford & Sons, speaking to young voters.
I see your power, and I am so proud of you. Can we hear it for our first-time voters?
ABC's Mary Bruce, one-on-one with Harris.
I really want to bring our country together. We've had about a decade of this Trump era that has been all about, there's so much about it that's been about dividing people and having Americans point their fingers at each other. And I think people are exhausted with it, and it's not empowering.
So we're just 2 days away. We record this on Thursday. It airs on Sunday. A couple points, let's talk about the importance of getting out to vote. And react to that, and really, what is your message to folks on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, however long a time takes to figure out who wins this election? What is your message to the folks who are on the wrong side of the outcome?
My hope is that, in my own view, not as a Catholic priest, if I have to speak to the parishioners or the congregation, the only message I would relate to them before the election is vote their conscience. And I do hope that every general election or midterm election we become so divisive politically. And I used to live in Europe for 10 years. And then Australia for 6 years, and of course, a good part of my life was in Vietnam growing up. Here in the U.S., we take the freedom to vote for granted, and we don't understand that 3/4 of the population of the world out there, they don't have the privilege to vote and to elect their leaders. And here we do have it, but then we have become so divisive. And my hope for our future is that, especially, unfortunately, the mainstream medias, news anchors, and so on, I hope they can talk positive about their opponents, not negative about their opponents. Because the more negative we talk about one another, the more divisive we become. And I have not seen that among mainstream media, politicians, and those who run for office. I think we need to stop negatives, period.
I couldn't agree with you more, Tram. We just need, first of all, I wish we had a system somewhat like the system in the United Kingdom, where the election season is a very limited amount of time. Our election season seems to be perpetual and endless.
That's right. Yeah.
Enough already. And I always, when I was in the pulpit, I always said, it is an ethical commandment for everyone to vote their conscience, to study the election scrupulously, and then go and vote. It's only been about 200 or so years that Jewish people anywhere in the world had the ability to vote, and it started right here. Actually, it started when these were British colonies before the American Revolution. And that is to be cherished. And the fact that in America, you do not have to be of that religion or this religion in order to vote or in order to seek and hold office. And this is something that we have to protect. How? By simply participating.
I think we're pretty much all in agreement. Next topic. No.
You can't get off
But
that
I'll
easy
stretch
track.
it out a little bit. But when I went into the pulpit, I never took my politics with me. I have a certain perspective, as Stan knows. I'm sure. But that wasn't my role. My primary role was to interpret the biblical text to the best of my ability, and in this context, encourage people to participate, as Stan says, to vote. I will say that oftentimes, as we come up to the end, so to speak, the Tuesday, what is it, November 5th, I think, as we come up to that date, I do thank God that I don't live in a swing state. Because we would be inundated right now with commercials and so on. I do, I enjoy, I'm a junkie for news and political news especially, but this is just, it's time to get it over with. And in a sense, we as community leaders, I'm retired, so these two gents can lead communities a little bit more than I can. But to model appropriate behavior and unity after the election, I think that's very important for us.
Right.
That's the best I can do.
No, very good. And I was in the Atlanta TV market, not Atlanta, but this past week. And you turn the TV on, every other ad, either a lottery ad or Harris or Trump ad. Every ad, it was blown away.
It's wonderful to live in Kentucky and Indiana, isn't it?
And so on the election topic, there's two amendments in Kentucky. We've heard a lot about Amendment 2. Amendment 1. It reads, are you in favor of amending sections 145 and 155 of the Constitution of Kentucky to prohibit persons who are not citizens of the United States from being allowed to vote in the Commonwealth of Kentucky? That's Amendment 1. Thoughts on that?
I mean, you know, that's a no-brainer. We've been doing this for years. How can a non-citizen of the United States vote in the Commonwealth of Kentucky?
I agree.
How could you pull that one off?
I don't know. I've never sought ways to circumvent the law, but and I think my understanding is this amendment to the Constitution really just kind of cleans up what already is the law. And Kentucky is one of the I don't know if one of the few, one of the several states that requires a picture ID, which we can get into that later. But yeah, this is Stan. I'm with you. Duh. This makes sense, but some people do push that.
I echo that. I mean, I think if for civic duties and as a citizen to participate in the life of the whole state or in the country, and voting is a sacred thing, a privilege, and it's granted to those who are citizens, not just to anyone. Otherwise, why don't we invite the whole world to vote for the country? Nowadays, with technology, they can vote online and everything, but it doesn't work that way. Voting and casting the ballots is a sacred thing for the citizens to do so. So I agree, it's a duh things. But every now and then we have questions raised for us to entertain, but yes.
And it's interesting because this is an amendment on our election ballot, and it's happening in Virginia right now, right?
Right.
We have the case with the Supreme Court just weighing in that 1,800 votes, I believe, or something like that, that are being thrown out because they were not proven to be legal citizens that had voted.
Yeah, they in Virginia they are self-professed non-citizens. They've checked a box saying they were non-citizens, and so Virginia, the governor is by law required to clear them off the rolls.
Why would someone check such a box?
If they were
They just wanted to provoke.
I mean, okay,
it's a box for some other form, and the form filters through the system, and they say, oh well, you check this box, you can't vote.
So are they new to the United States? So they haven't.
There's what 1,800 of them. I can't speak. I'm just presuming that in some way they were applying for some other government program, checked the box that they were not U.S. citizens, and then the Commonwealth of Virginia said, well, sorry, there was a challenge to that, and the Supreme Court said, no, Virginia's correct.
And I also like the idea of, I know it has become a political talking point, unfortunately, but just think about, we go to any government building, we have to present an ID. And for many states that do not require an ID for voting, where we argue it is a sacred thing, it is one of the most important civic duties for a citizen to do so, then having an ID to reassure that the vote or the ballot is valid, I think it's reasonable. But our political climate has made that into a talking point, and it's just unfortunate. I think we go to an airport, a government building, or even some banks in some areas, you have to have to present who you are. And here voting is so sacred to the nations, and we just don't make it more careful. I find it to be very sad.
Do y'all want to talk about Amendment 2, or we can move on to a different topic? Keep it in the election.
Do we want to disagree about that?
I think that I believe very strongly in supporting the public school system. That's where my taxes go, and that's where I want my money to go, because I agree with that, and there are some private school systems that I may wish to support, and there are others that I would wish not to support in some ways. But it's a matter of supporting another system other than the public system is a matter of personal choice.
And Stan makes a very reasonable presentation of his view. I would say almost convincing.
That word almost.
My preference is that the dollars be attached to the individual, the family, and that the parents be trusted with being able to make those decisions. Now, the amendment simply opens up the possibilities. A lot of the commercials are suggesting it's a voucher. It could very well result in a voucher system, but that's a matter for the law. Laws being passed. The constitutional amendment simply opens up the possibility of funds following the child, following the student to the school, and opening up options for the family.
For that, I agree with John and disagree with Stan. I'm sorry. I think the dollar should go with the child, and the parents or the child's parents are the one who make the decision. They know what is best for their child or their children, and even though, of course, tax is here, the government collects, but in the end, it's individuals' tax, and they should have a say in where their child should go. When I lived in Australia, that was part of the things, and the government subsidized every child that go to school, whether public or private. And it works since the early 1970s until now. and it seemed to be working well.
But in the United States, we have a separation between religion and state. In Australia, which is a Commonwealth nation, I believe that there is a church, a national church, like the Church of England. And so this is, I cherish the fact that there's a separation between religion and state, because I believe it makes a level playing field for all communities. And this is really the basis for my saying that I'm against that. And you know what? I'm probably more against that for Jewish day schools than I am for other forms of private education.
Well, if anything, we finally found something we could disagree on. If anything, we can conclude, and I don't mean to take your job away from, by modeling how to get along and still disagree. And I think we can disagree and still leave as friends.
And not be disagreeable.
That's right. That's right.
Amendment 2, so we're clear, reads, to give parents choices and educational opportunities for their children, are you in favor of enabling the General Assembly to provide financial support for the education costs of students in kindergarten through 12th grade who are outside the system of common public schools by amending the Constitution of Kentucky as stated? So that is as it reads on the ballot. So it does leave it open to interpretation and further laws to be made about what happens in the General Assembly. That will surely be a battle.
I think so. That's one probably I'm following more than the presidential election, at least in Kentucky.
And not to leave our Indiana side out, we have
that's
about
right,
90 seconds. They do have one amendment on the ballot, and it reads, shall the Constitution of the state of Indiana be amended to remove the state superintendent of public education from the list of office holders who shall discharge the powers and duties of the governor if the office of the governor and lieutenant governor are both vacant?
I didn't understand that one.
I think it's the line of succession for if they're not there, like they're at the bottom of the list.
You mean like if the governor and lieutenant governor indisposed, the superintendent of education becomes
well,
the governor?
Somewhere down the list, the superintendent's there. So
right,
who knows?
I'm not a Hoosier anymore, so never mind.
Yeah, I think it's just cleaning up their succession, plans. But anyway, thanks for the great conversation this week. Go out and vote on Tuesday.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exercise one's civic duty.
All agree on that. Thanks to our panel this week, Father Toan Do, Epiphany Catholic Church, Dr. John Slider, retired pastor, Free Methodist Church, Rabbi Stan Miles, Louisville Melton School. Thanks for watching and listening this week. We'll have our new moral side next week. And again, get out and vote.